They didn't want you to know this, not your teachers, not your government, not the polished diplomats who dress ambition in the language of peace, because the truth would terrify you. There's a shadow war unfolding, one not fought with weapons, but with codes, currencies, cultures, and cognition. And the next global empire isn't building missiles, it's building minds. You're not watching a race. You're witnessing a quiet assassination of the old order. And the assassin? India. You were conditioned to see India as background noise, call centers, customer service, curry jokes, and crowded streets. But that was a distraction, a brilliantly executed mask. While the West slept in luxury and laughed in arrogance, India was reprogramming the rules of the game. Not just playing the game, mastering it. Because here's what they won't teach you in any economics class. True dominance is never loud. It's engineered, cultivated, hidden. While America built Silicon Valley, India built a digital nervous system. While the West glorified excess, India optimized for efficiency. And while Americans fought for the spotlight, Indians claimed the infrastructure beneath it. This isn't a tech rivalry. This is a psychological reorientation of global power. You thought leadership was about headlines, charisma, money. No. Leadership in the 21st century is about attention, data, and digital sovereignty. And India? It's already inside your phone, your wallet, your workflow, silently, strategically, without asking for permission. This is not the India of Gandhi. This is not the India of 1947. This is the India of control, of calculation, of convergence. Let me show you the face behind the curtain. While you were scrolling Instagram, India built Aadhaar, the largest biometric ID system in human history. While you were tapping Venmo, India was processing more daily digital payments than touchstone. US, UK, Germany, and France combined. While you waited for your bank to approve a $300 overdraft, a farmer in a remote Indian village got a microloan through AI-based algorithms linked to public transaction data. This isn't sci-fi. It's the weaponization of necessity. America innovated for the top 10%. India builds for the bottom billion. And when you build for survival, not convenience, you create systems that cannot be broken. India doesn't mimic the West, it mutates it. And here's where it gets darker. India's entrepreneurs aren't dreaming of selling to Facebook or Google. They're building the next Facebook, the next Google. And not for the West, but for the global South, the 4 billion humans America forgot to notice. This isn't about competing anymore. It's about replacement. America built the rules. India is building the reset button. And you're living in the prelude of a power shift that will flip the world map upside down. Every economy, every algorithm, every alliance. Rewritten. This speech is not about admiration, it's about alertness. Because the people who will survive what's coming are not the most patriotic or the most nostalgic. They're the most aware. You're not too late. But you're not early either. You're at the edge. And if you keep watching, you'll understand how India went from being a service provider to the architect of the next civilization. Let's go deeper. This next truth may haunt you. America thinks it owns the game because it built the board. But what happens when someone flips the table? That's what India is doing right now. Not in protest, not with noise, but with precision, with something the West forgot how to use: hunger. Because comfort is a liar, and while America got high on its own legacy, India studied in silence. It memorized the cheat codes. Then it began writing new ones. Here's the truth. Nobody talks about Power doesn't come from wealth. It comes from control of systems. And right now, India is not just entering the systems, it's becoming them. It started with the basics, identity. Most of the West takes that for granted. A birth certificate, a social security number. But for over 1 billion Indians, identity was never official. They were invisible to banks, to governments, to opportunity. So India created Aadhaar, not a fancy app, not a venture-backed startup, a state-engineered biometric ID system, fingerprints, iris scans, digital signatures. It didn't just give people access. It gave the country data, organized power, unfiltered intelligence. Now layer that with UPI, India's real-time digital payments platform. 10 billion transactions a month. No credit cards, no PayPal. Just direct, instant, peer-to-peer control of capital. You know what that is? Currency control. Not through banks, through the phone in your hand. Now imagine that being connected to your tax records, your education, your medical history, your land titles. This isn't surveillance. It's infrastructure warfare. And here's the part that should scare every Western technocrat. India gave this away for free. No ads, no monopoly, no trillion-dollar IPO. Because power isn't in monetization, it's in mobilization. You see, India didn't just leapfrog America's systems, it ignored them. While Silicon Valley obsessed over dopamine and engagement, India obsessed over access and scale. Because here's the law of the new world. Scale wins. And who has scale? Not the country with the most billionaires, but the country with the most driven minds connected by one digital bloodstream. India didn't raise unicorns to sell them. It raised them to lead them. Zerodha, Razorpay, Byju's, Freshworks. These aren't spin-offs of Western ideas. They're manifestations of a new logic. A logic that doesn't care for polished English or Ivy League degrees. A logic that says, build for 10 million or don't build at all. So when America builds platforms for profit, India builds ecosystems for survival. When America says market share, India says human share. Now ask yourself, which one do you think lasts longer? Let me be brutally clear. India's rise is not an accident. It's a plan, a long game, a patient, painful, powerful, long game. It waited 70 years. It watched. It worked. It withstood ridicule. Now it moves. If you've watched this far, then you know this isn't about India versus America. This is about asleep versus awake, legacy versus leverage. And right now, someone in Mumbai or Bangalore or Hyderabad is coding something that will replace a part of your economy. Not in 10 years. Next quarter. Comment below the phrase, I see the shift. Type it twice, to lock it in, to wake others up, to let the algorithm know you are not blind anymore. The game is being rewritten, and those who win next won't look like those who won before. Get ready. You want to know why America should be worried? Because India knows something the West forgot. Failure is the greatest teacher when you don't run from it. For decades, India was called the struggling democracy, the developing nation, the tech support capital of the world. And while the West laughed, dismissed, and moved on, India listened. It swallowed the insult. It stared into the mirror of its own brokenness. And then it did something dangerous. It turned failure into fuel. See, America was born with a head start, resources, influence, timing. India was born with resistance. But when you grow up in chaos, when your roads are cracked, your power grid flickers, your water isn't clean, you learn to build under pressure. That's what India did. It turned problems into prototypes. lack into leverage, pain into pattern recognition. Where the West saw poverty, India saw scale. Where the West saw disorder, India saw opportunity. You think innovation comes from clean labs and million-dollar seed rounds? No. It comes from a village where Wi-Fi barely works and the school has one computer, and a kid figures out how to build an app that teaches math to 30 children using SMS. It comes from a rural doctor diagnosing illness by phone because there's no hospital for 300 miles. It comes from a fintech startup giving microloans to women with no collateral, no credit score, just trust. This is not Silicon Valley. This is Survival Valley. And you cannot compete with the man who learned to win without help. That's India's edge. It never had luxury, so it never needed it. It never had access, so it built its own keys. It never had the spotlight, so it became obsessed with the work in the dark. And now that spotlight, it's moving. Look at the patterns. When China rose, the world panicked. When India rises, the world underestimates. That's a mistake, because he's the truth. America builds dominance through fear. India builds resilience through friction. Which one lasts longer? It's not about GDP anymore. It's about psychological stamina. It's about who survives in crisis, who adapts faster, who needs less and builds more. India failed so many times the world stopped counting, but India never did. It built startups that flopped, infrastructure that crumbled, policies that backfired. And yet it kept moving. Why? Because failure in India is not a dead end. It's a ritual, a test, a filtration system. The weak quit. The strong adapt. The legends build again. That's why Indian entrepreneurs are feral geniuses. They don't need 10 iterations. They need one shot and a cracked phone screen. They don't pivot because of data. They pivot because their parents are watching. Because failure isn't a buzzword. It's hunger. It's family. It's proving you belong. And now that hunger has gone national. Millions of failures forged into steel. So while the West chases comfort, India embraces the bruise. The underdog has teeth now, and it's learned how to bite. In Section 4, we dive into the secret mindset shift behind India's rise, how the silent generation became the architect of tomorrow's power. You want to know how India plans to beat America at its own game? It's not with missiles, not with tanks, not with louder speeches, but with minds that refuse to be ignored. While the West was distracted by its own reflection, India was growing an army in the shadows, not of soldiers, but of thinkers, coders, engineers, builders, founders. And they didn't scream, they didn't boast. They built, quietly, ruthlessly, with vision beyond borders. This is the rise of India's silent generation, the ones who were raised to obey, but chose to create, the ones who were told to take orders, but learned to issue them. These aren't rebels, they're strategists, architects of the New World Order. And they don't ask for permission. You know the most dangerous man in the room? The one who never had a voice, but watched, listened, learned every crack in the system. India has tens of millions of them, and now they've stopped listening. Now they're speaking with code, capital, companies, policy, platforms. They don't want to imitate Silicon Valley. They want to replace it. And while America is busy arguing over influence, pronouns, and platforms, India is building identity infrastructure for 1.4 billion people. Digitally, securely, quietly. That's not a tech project. That's nation architecture. India's silent generation understands something the West forgot. Power is not how loud you are. Power is who sets the standard. And right now, India is writing the standard. India Stack, UPI DigiLocker, NDC. You've never heard of them? You will, because that's how silent power works. It doesn't ask for your attention. It earns your dependence. And then you can't move without it. America built the rails for the first internet. India is laying the tracks for the next one. A system that isn't locked behind credit cards and paywalls, but one that includes the farmer, the cell, dweller, the migrant worker. One biometric ID, one phone, and suddenly they're seen, banked, and connected. This is not just policy, it's precision warfare for the future of relevance. And while American teens are going viral on TikTok, Indian teens are building fintech apps on Android. While one side is dancing, the other is deploying. And here's where it gets serious. Every time America hesitates, India launches. Every time America doubts, India decides. And the world? The world is watching. Africa is modeling India's digital identity system. Southeast Asia is borrowing its payment infrastructure. Even Western regulators are peeking over the fence asking, how did they do this? Here's how. The silent generation stopped waiting for the West to lead and started building their own ladder, not to climb up to the table, but to replace the table. And now they're inviting the world to sit. So if you've been sleeping on India, wake up. This is not a fluke. It's a blueprint, and it's working. Comment, I build in silence twice if you're done waiting for permission. If you're ready to move in the dark while they look the other way. Because in Section 5, we go deeper into the mind control matrix of global power and how India is hacking it from the inside. Power has never just been about bombs, borders, or bullets. Power is psychological. It's about narrative. And for the last 70 years, America controlled the narrative. They told the world what success looked like. Blue jeans, Ivy League degrees, Silicon Valley billionaires, Netflix, fast food, and a stock market smile. But now, India is hacking the matrix. See, most people think control comes from force. It doesn't. Real control comes from belief. And if you can shape belief, you control behavior. That's how the West kept its grip, through Hollywood dreams, startup myths, and Ivy League gatekeeping. But here's the glitch in their system. India stopped believing the lie that validation must come from abroad, that foreign degrees equal intelligence, that success means leaving India to make it big, that mental empire is crumbling, and now India is building its own myths. Founders who stay home and dominate, actors who tell Indian stories on global stages, CEOs who don't apologize for their accents. That shift isn't just cultural, it's combat. Because when a nation reclaims its psychological sovereignty, no one can own it again. Look around. The top minds of Google, Microsoft, Adobe, IBM, Indian-born, not by accident, not by tokenism, but because the mind war has changed. While the West trained people to think inside comfort, India trained people to think inside constraints. And when your brain is shaped by chaos, corruption, pressure, and poverty, you don't just solve problems, you anticipate them. You think 10 moves ahead because you were born into the fire. This is why India's rise isn't just economic, it's psychological insurgency, a quiet revolution of confidence. Here's what the West doesn't want you to know. Control a man's environment, and you contain him. Control his mind, and you don't have to. For years, the world contained. But India. Now, India controls the mindset of innovation. Think about it. UPI isn't just an app. It's a mindset. Frictionless, scalable, unstoppable. India Stack isn't just infrastructure, it's a belief system built on sovereignty, not subscription. India didn't need to break Silicon Valley, it just needed to build something better. And now, the narrative is shifting. The countries once teaching India are now learning from it. This is what happens when a nation stops consuming stories and starts writing its own. That's the new game. And India is playing it to win. The mind war is the final war. Control perception and you control everything. America knows this. That's why they're panicking. Because India doesn't need to beg for a seat anymore. It's rewriting the script. And when you write the script, you control who wins. So to every man and woman listening right now, ask yourself, whose story are you living? And when will you start writing your own? Comment, I build in silence twice below. Lock in your transformation. Prove you've left the matrix of approval. In Section 6, we take the gloves off and expose the raw mechanics of manipulation that shaped global dominance and how India is turning the machine against its creators. There's something you were never supposed to notice. The entire global system, the schools, the media, the tech platforms, the economics, was built to manipulate your perception of power, to keep certain countries dominant and others in perpetual dependency. America mastered it. They didn't just export products. They exported paradigms. The American dream wasn't just a fantasy. It was a filter. One that said, to matter, you must speak our language, wear our clothes, study our books, beg for our jobs, and build our platforms. And most of the world complied, including India, for a long time. Degrees from Harvard, jobs in Silicon Valley, validation through foreign investment. That was the chain, the invisible leash. But India didn't just break the chain, it studied it. Then it built its own collar, this time for the system that once held it captive. Let me say it plainly. India is not beating America at a different game. It's beating America at its own game. Global capital? Check. Platform innovation? Check. Data dominance already happening. But most importantly, narrative manipulation? Now that's where India flipped the script. Take soft power. America used Hollywood, media, and tech to shape how the world saw it. Hero, savior, visionary, innovator. India understood that game too. Now Indian stories are flooding Netflix. Bollywood actors have global deals. Indian origin leaders are becoming voices of reason on the world stage. And the best part? The West can't stop it, because the manipulation was always designed to be invisible. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let me break this down. For decades, global rankings were rigged. Economic indexes, education systems, startup ratings, they were all built through a Western lens. But that lens didn't capture reality. It captured control. And here's where India got dangerous. It stopped arguing with the bias and started replacing the algorithm. Instead of fixing a broken system, India built its own. UPI replaced Visa, ONDC began disrupting Amazon. DigiLocker outpaced Dropbox in utility. Aadhaar became the backbone of an entirely new data identity framework. The new strategy? Stop asking for a seat at the table. Build your own damn table. The manipulators built their empire on the assumption that others would follow their rules. India isn't just breaking the rules, it's rewriting them. It's not just participation, it's domination with elegance. Now understand this transformation isn't loud, It's not flashy. It's quiet power, silent, systemic, surgical. While everyone watched GDP charts and military drills, India was recalibrating psychological terrain. And manipulation, the real kind, isn't obvious. It looks like opportunity. It sounds like praise. It tastes like progress. But if it makes you smaller, quieter, more obedient, it's control. India figured it out. Now it's playing the West's psychological warfare back against them, only better. And here's the twist. India's rise isn't coming through domination. It's coming through disruption. It's not trying to conquer with war. It's replacing empires with ecosystems. The future will be built on cooperation through sovereignty, not submission through dependency. And India is engineering that future, one silent power move at a time. In Section 7, we go deeper into the final piece, the lifetime table of empires, and why America may already be past its prime. You'll understand why India is not rising as a trend, but as a cycle of history reclaiming its place at the top, and what it means for you right now if you want to lead in the new world. All empires fall, not from sudden wars, but from slow arrogance, decay dressed as dominance, pride disguised as progress. Rome didn't burn overnight. It rotted from within while the world watched it glow. Now let me ask you something disturbing. What if America is already Rome? What if you're living inside a machine that's out of time, grinding forward because of momentum, not mastery? Because here's the secret they won't tell you. Power doesn't vanish. It migrates. It doesn't announce its exit. It fades in the rear view, while another force rises quietly in the shadows. And right now, that force is India. Let's talk time. America's rise took shape post-World War II. In just 70 years, it built the modern world's infrastructure, military bases, financial systems, the internet, cultural domination. But 70 years is the average shelf life of a hyperpower. The British Empire collapsed within 80 years of its peak. The Ottomans, 100. The Soviets, less than 50. Decline isn't a headline. It's a rhythm. And America's rhythm is off. Debt spirals, political chaos, cultural fragmentation, innovation slowed by red tape and risk aversion. Meanwhile, India is hungry, disciplined, young. India's median age is 28. America's is almost 39. That alone tells you whose clock is ticking forward and whose is ticking out. India isn't distracted by identity politics or ideological warfare. It's building infrastructure, educating engineers, digitizing villages, powering startups. America spends more time debating pronouns than building pipelines. That's not politics, that's timeline decay. Now here's the haunting truth. Empires don't fall because they're weak. They fall because they forget how they got strong. America forgot. India remembers. For 1,000 years, India was the crown jewel of civilization, trade, mathematics, spiritual depth, a land of invention before the West knew what a compass was. Then came the fall, colonization, fragmentation, servitude, a forced sleep. But what you're witnessing now is a 1.4 billion soul civilization waking up. This isn't just economics, it's karmic correction. a reckoning, a rebalancing. And it's not about replacing America. It's about restoring India. And here's what you need to know as a viewer, a citizen, a strategist. History doesn't care about nostalgia. It rewards those who adapt. If you think the game is about English-speaking CEOs and Silicon Valley exits, you've already lost. The real game is energy, focus, cultural memory, strategic patience. India has all four. It doesn't need to shout. It's listening, building, positioning. The tectonic plates of power are shifting, and you're standing on a fault line. So ask yourself, are you prepared for the inversion? When the questions change, when the leadership looks different, when the old rules no longer apply. Because here's the final warning. You will either become part of the new narrative or get buried under the old one. Comment this twice if you're ready to choose. The crown moves in silence. Again, the crown moves in silence. This isn't hype. This isn't prophecy. This is pattern. And if you see it now, if you truly understand, then you're not just watching history. You're walking into it. Stay dangerous. Stay awake. Stay sovereign. India is moving, and the world will follow. You were never trained for this war. Not in school. Not by your government. Not by your mentors. Because this war doesn't use missiles. It uses mental models. And right now, India is winning by mastering something far more powerful than weapons, mindset warfare. The West believed the battle was about GDP, nukes, or AI. But India saw the truth. The final empire isn't territorial. It's psychological. The one who controls the mindset controls the future. Let me explain. For decades, the American mindset was the gold standard. Confidence, individualism, disruption, hustle. But beneath that surface was a hidden virus. Entitlement. Comfort bred apathy. Abundance killed hunger. And the very system that created ambition mutated into a machine of excuses, victimhood, and distraction. India? It went the opposite direction. Because when you grow up in constraint, you don't get the luxury of entitlement. You get adaptation. You get grit. You get clarity. The Indian youth isn't asking why life is hard. They already know. They're asking how to rise anyway. That shift, subtle, invisible, deadly, is how empires are born in silence. Let me take you deeper. In America, a failure is a setback. In India, it's a requirement. In America, risk is analyzed to death. In India, it's survival instinct. In America, success is about optics. In India, it's about ownership. This is mental infrastructure. This is the new battlefield. And you cannot win this war with likes, dopamine hits, or academic degrees. You win it with psychological endurance. That's why this section isn't about countries anymore. It's about you. Because you're not just watching India rise, you're watching a template for personal power, and it's coded in fire. See, every man and woman alive today is standing in front of a choice. Will you adopt the mindset of a declining empire or the rising one? The declining mindset waits to be saved. The rising one becomes the savior. The declining mindset blames. The rising one builds. The declining mindset asks for comfort. The rising one demands evolution. You want to prepare for the future? You want to stay relevant while the empires trade positions? Then stop consuming like an American and start building like an Indian. Create when you're unsure. Launch when you're unready. Move when you're afraid. Because here's the truth that global elites don't want you to know. The game isn't rigged. You were just trained to play it wrong. India rewired itself. From poverty to possibility, from service to strategy, from following to leading. That's not a national transformation. That's a spiritual one. And if they can do it at the scale of 1.4 billion, what's your excuse? What if your failure wasn't proof you're broken, but evidence you were chosen? What if you stopped hiding behind systems and started creating them? What if your entire mindset was your hidden passport to global relevance? It is. It always has been. But no one told you. Until now. So here's your final command. Burn the blueprint they gave you. Study the one India is building. The old empire said, work hard, obey, fit in. The new one says, think sharp, move silent, take the crown. If you've watched this far, you already know which side you're on. And now you don't just understand India's rise. You understand your own rebirth. Welcome to the new empire. And remember, the crown moves in silence. There's a lie you've been told your whole life, not by one person, but by an entire system. You didn't notice it, because it wasn't shouted. It was shown. Every time you opened a textbook, every time you looked at a globe, every time you watched the news, you were being manipulated, not with words, but with frames. Because the way the world is shown to you is not how it actually is. Let me explain. Look at a standard world map. You know the one. America, huge and centered. Europe, stretched out. India, downplayed. Africa, compressed. It's called the Mercator projection, and it's geographically incorrect. Deliberately so. Why? Because perception is power. Make something look small, and you make it feel insignificant. Make something invisible, and you erase its threat. This isn't about geography. This is about manipulation. India isn't just rising in power, it's ripping the curtain off the illusion. For decades, the narrative was controlled. Who's the innovator? Who's the threat? Who's the sidekick? And India was typecast. The call center, the support role, the background voice. But here's the truth they didn't want you to see. India was learning, watching, listening, silently collecting data, silently building infrastructure, silently reprogramming its national identity. And while you were distracted by headlines, India was rewriting the plot. Let me go deeper. You've been taught to believe power is loud, but real power? It whispers. It moves under the radar. It controls not by force, but by framing. Ask yourself, why do you know more about Hollywood than Hyderabad? Why can you name 10 American startups, but not one Indian one? Why is Western failure seen as noble, but Eastern success viewed with suspicion? Because the game was never neutral. The West didn't just export capitalism, it exported narratives. It made itself the protagonist of the global story, even when it wasn't in the room. But now? Now India is flipping the lens. No more supporting character. No more shadow role. India isn't begging to be seen. It's becoming unignorable. From AI policy to moon landings, from digital infrastructure to startup unicorns, India is not asking for permission. It's not trying to earn a seat at the table. It's building a new table. And here's where it gets personal. Every system that ever made you feel small, every chart, every map, every story that told you you're too late, too poor, too far behind, was a weapon of control. And now that weapon is losing its grip, because when 1 billion people stop believing the lie collapses. So I want you to look at the map again. Not the one on your wall, the one in your mind. Who told you where the center was? Who told you what size your dreams could be? Who told you who the hero was supposed to look like? That's the final manipulation, the last illusion. They didn't just map the world, they mapped your limits. But the rise of India proves one thing. You can redraw the map, and that's exactly what's happening. Right now, this isn't about politics, it's not about nationalism, it's about psychological sovereignty. And India is claiming it, loud enough to echo across continents, yet silent enough to bypass every radar. If you're still watching this, comment this phrase twice to signal your awakening. Redraw the map, redraw the map. Because if you can't change your frame, you can't change your fate. And the ones who control the frame, they never needed to lift a sword. They just needed to make you look the wrong way. Now, you're looking straight at the truth. They won't see it coming. Not because they're blind, but because they're arrogant. For centuries, global power wore a Western suit, spoke English with a polished accent, and sat in boardrooms sipping imported dominance. They never expected a storm to come from where they sent their outsourced calls and outsourced blame. But here's the thing about silence. It builds pressure. And when it breaks, it doesn't knock, it detonates. India has been quiet for too long, not asleep, calculating. Every failure mocked, every delay scorned, every chaotic moment. It wasn't dysfunction. It was data. Data on how the game is rigged. Data on where the weaknesses are. Data on how to move differently. And now, with 1.4 billion minds connected by identity, ambition, and code, the silence is cracking. This isn't just a rise in GDP. This isn't a population flex. This is a spiritual reset of global power, not by war, but by will. America played loud. India plays long. It doesn't shout victories. It just absorbs. Absorbs knowledge. Absorbs resistance. Absorbs narrative. Until it becomes impossible to contain. Let's talk about narrative. Why do you think the West glorifies its own crises but demonizes Eastern success? An American startup fails, it's learning. An Indian startup succeeds, it's suspicious. An American billionaire dominates a market, he's a visionary. An Indian billionaire does it, he's dangerous. That isn't coincidence, that's cultural firewalling. A last-ditch effort to protect a system that senses it's being out-evolved. Because India isn't just winning at America's game. It's writing a new one in a language only the future can read. Let's make it uncomfortably clear. This isn't just economics. This is about who writes history next. The textbooks, the timelines, the heroes, the villains. India isn't interested in footnotes anymore. It's aiming for chapters. And you? You're living in that transition where one empire echoes and another awakens. But awakenings aren't peaceful. They rattle systems. They threaten egos. They expose the fraud in everything that once felt untouchable. Just like the Roman Empire couldn't imagine the world without Latin dominance. Just like Britain couldn't fathom a post-colonial reality. The Western world can't grasp the idea of being outmaneuvered by the very nations it once civilized. But that's the flaw of supremacy. It dulls your edge. And while one side was drinking champagne in Davos, the other was coding in the dark. While one side argued about pronouns and headlines, the other side was building payments, platforms, and power. Now the lights are turning on, and the world is starting to realize the storm already started. It's digital, it's demographic, it's deliberate. India isn't the underdog, it's the overlooked god of a new global order. And the longer you ignore it, the harder it'll hit when the silence finally screams. So remember this. The next superpower won't arrive with tanks or treaties. It'll arrive with timelines, talent, and truth. India isn't coming. It's here. And the game? The game has already changed. Let them keep sleeping. Let them stay proud. Because when the storm hits, only those who heard the silence will be ready.